reminds me of just going back home.
That's right. And we've got Eddie Montgomery with us a little later on in the program. You're listening to him singing right there. Thank you very much for joining us. We've got a busy Tuesday live from New York City. But first, straight to our top story. It is the battle of the dueling memos.
My goodness, the House Intelligence Committee voting unanimously to release the Democrats' rebuttal. Now it's up to the president whether or not that will be made public.
So there's a memo, and a follow-up memo. Griff Jenkins is live in Washington because he got the memo that we need him to start the show today. Hey, Griff.
Good morning, guys.
Morning.
Memo battle is on. The committee voted unanimously to release the Democrats' counter memo. Now the president has 5 days to decide whether or not to release it to the public. The same review period as the Republican one. And the top Democrat on the committee, Adam Schiff, says this will better inform the public, and he's calling on the White House not to make any redactions based on politics.
In our memo, in terms of sources and methods, we want to make sure that those that are in the best position to vet that have the opportunity to do so. We want to make sure that the White House does not redact our memo for political purposes, and obviously that's a deep concern.
But Chairman of the Intel Committee, Devin Nunes, defended his memo that asserts the FBI surveillance abuses, calling them very dangerous, as the president in Ohio yesterday said the Nunes memo really exposes Democrats.
Did we catch them in the act or what? You know what I'm talking. Oh, did we catch them in the act? They are very embarrassed. They never thought they were going to get caught. We caught them. Oh, it's so much fun. We're like the great sleuth.
Now we wait to see what the president does as Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi calls on the president to expeditiously release it. And guys, we're also learning that there may have been a second dossier as well, put together by that same British spy Christopher Steele, containing anti-Trump information that came from, quote, a friend of the Clintons. You'll remember Mr. Steele has been referred by Senators Graham and Grassley to the DOJ for criminal prosecution, possibly. So there are more layers to this onion to peel back.
So wait a second, Griff. Indeed. So the Christopher Steele says, I don't know who I was working for. I just got hired by Fusion GPS. I didn't know that I was working for Hillary Clinton's camp. Was getting information from Hillary Clinton's camp, maybe feeding it to the press, and they have this circular echo chamber that put a narrative out that affects this case.
That's right, a second dossier, and it appears that may have also reached the State Department as well. There's going to be a lot to look into this, and that's exactly what Chairman Nunes says he's digging into right now.
John Kerry's State Department?
That's correct.
All right. Griff, thank you very much.
If you're confused, there is that first dossier that we've been talking about.
The dirty dossier.
That's right, the dirty dossier. Then there is a second one. We're going to be talking about it throughout the show, but it basically alleges that Hillary Clinton's friends were feeding information to that spy, that English spy, Christopher Steele, to come up with the dirty dossier against her opponents.
Right. It was going to be the backup to the original dossier. So, and we do know some of the names. We talked a little bit about it yesterday. Cody Shearer, who's a friend of the Clintons. He had apparently been a journalist for a while. Then there's a guy who's actually currently working at the State Department. This guy's name is Jonathan Weiner. He worked under Hillary Rodham Clinton. He is his special envoy for Libya. And then you've got Sidney Blumenthal, a longtime friend of the Clintons, worked in the Clinton White House. The three of them fed stuff to Steele. He put in this other one, which was the backup plan, dossier 2, the backup plan, if dossier 1 didn't work with FISA. It's unbelievable.
And you remember Shatter?
Unbelievable.
In Shatter, they almost like 24 hours after Hillary Clinton lost, they said this whole, let's start building up the Russian narrative. That's exactly what they're doing, and that's where we're at.
So you have these senators now, Grassley and Lindsey Graham, that are heading this up, and they're asking, they said that Christopher Steele lied to the FBI. They want him investigated again. Now, going back to Griff's original comments about the memo. So you remember that memo came out of the House Intelligence Committee.
The one from Friday.
That's right, the one that was released on Friday by the president. Well, the Democrats didn't want that released, right? None of the Democrats within the House Intel Committee voted for that. Every single Republican and Democrat voted for the Democratic rebuttal to come out yesterday.
Right, and in this Democratic memo, they evidently push back on what the Republicans are saying, and that's what Andy McCabe flat out said, without the dossier, we don't get a FISA warrant. And they're going to push back on the fact that there was nothing in the warrant that said the FISA petition that said anything about Hillary Clinton or that being the dossier being politically funded. But it was generically, or reportedly generically referenced about a politically motivated dossier, or possibly. They never said Hillary Clinton for America on it. So that's what the Democrats going to push back on.
From what I understand, apparently the Democratic 10-page rebuttal is very specific. And there's apparently some stuff in there that's going to have to get redacted. And then if the White House redacts it, then it's going to be a political firestorm.
Or the FBI, too.
Well, they have not had a comment yet. But if the White House were to say, look, you got to take this stuff out, it has secrets in there. So stay tuned for that. In the meantime, Mark Levin was on last night here on the channel. And he said, why is it the Democrats didn't want that original memo that came out on Friday to come out? And all this other stuff. Why is it? He connects some dots.
Now we know why Schiff and the rest of them are fighting so hard. Now we know why the left-wing Praetorian Guard Democrat media are fighting so hard. Who are they trying to protect? Hillary Clinton. Who else are they trying to protect? Barack Obama. Loretta Lynch knew about these FISA warrants. Yates, the Deputy Attorney General. The extensions, Rob Rosenstein, now the Deputy Attorney General, he knew. FBI Director Comey, Deputy Director McCabe. Why would it be left out of the president's daily intelligence briefing, which I mentioned in March, Congress also needs to get a hold of?
Don Jr. also commented on this, telling you, Americans, why you should care about this, why it should worry you, all this abuse, this FISA abuse. Listen.
Americans should be a little bit scared about what's going on right now. I mean, when you hear this stuff going on, you don't think of this happening in the United States. You don't think of this happening in a country where we have a foundation of laws and principles grounded in the Constitution. Because this, to me, seems like a clear violation of that. You have a court that virtually no one knows anything about, just haphazardly granting full surveillance of American citizens, in this case, the duly elected future president of the United States, based on shady information paid for by the opposition party's candidate in that presidential race. I mean, this is crazy stuff.
Well, just keep in mind, too, when the Democrat memo comes out, the FBI will get a look at it, too. So it's not just going to be the administration crossing things out. It's going to be the FBI possibly redacting and crossing things out.
FBI and DOJ have that memo. So does the president. The president has 5 days, just like he did with that original memo, to distribute it. It will be redacted.
Also, Devin Nunes has called for the release of all of the transcripts of all 4 times they went to the FISA court. Exactly what did they ask for? Just one other note. Christopher Steele, the spy, was supposed to show up in a London courtroom yesterday to give a deposition in a multi-million-dollar lawsuit against BuzzFeed. He did not show because he does not want to talk, and that is not good.
Unrelated but related now, this news. We all were focused on football, and 100 million people watched the Super Bowl. But then news came out about a tragedy. Colts linebacker Edwin Jackson killed in a crash the morning of the Super Bowl. Now we find out, according to Indiana State Police, who that person that killed him was, a Guatemalan citizen, twice deported from our country for being here illegally.
Wow. So the driver and the linebacker, they were in the car and the linebacker was getting sick. So they pulled over on the side of the highway and they were outside of the car. That man right there allegedly ran them over, was 3 times the legal limit, was drunk. And one of the individuals he hit flew into the middle of the road, was run over again. I mean, this guy has been deported 2 times, once in 2007 and once in 2009.
Apparently, as soon as it happened, he took off and
on foot
tried to run away. When he was caught, he told the police, "I'm from Mexico." He's not. He's in the country illegally from Guatemala. He is currently being detained by the local authorities on behalf of the feds. A state rep out in Indiana, Todd Rokita, tweeted this out. This news should make all Americans angry. A twice-deported illegal immigrant is suspected of killing 2 Hoosiers, including Colts linebacker Edwin Jackson. We must do more to get these dangerous illegal immigrant criminals off our streets, build a wall, and put an end to illegal immigration.
Mike Huckabee weighed in.
All of this was unnecessary. If we had border security, he would have been deported once. Well, first of all, he would have never gotten in. But once deported, he wouldn't have been back. Now he's twice deported. and he's come back and he's killed 2 people. What does it take to make some of these people understand that the reason that Americans want the wall is not because we don't want people to come and share the American dream. It's we don't want people coming in and giving us the American nightmare of some dead, innocent people killed by folks who shouldn't have been here in the first place.
It is a parent's worst nightmare. Right. Sabine Durden, she's been on our show a bunch. She's an angel mom, was on the campaign trail with the president talking about immigration and how important it was. And the reason she supported President Trump is because she said he supports no amnesty and he wants to build the wall. She said all she has left of her son are his ashes.
All right, 10 minutes now after the hour. Jillian, welcome. I know you've had a day of celebration in Philadelphia.
Yes,
Parade day.
Right. Yes.
Are you going to go to the parade?
I'm trying.
What time is the parade?
11 a.m. on Thursday. Not that I have every detail mapped out.
All right. Great.
Good morning to you guys. To you at home as well. Let's get right to this Fox News alert that we're following. The U.S. military's show of force intensifying against the Taliban in Afghanistan. A record number of airstrikes just dropped on a training camp, taking out terrorist fighters. The B-52 bombers also destroying several stolen Afghan National Army vehicles that were in the process of being converted to explosive devices. In just a few hours, Vice President Pence will arrive in Tokyo on his way to the Olympics in South Korea. He's expected to meet with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, focused on maintaining pressure on North Korea.
We're traveling to the Olympics to make sure that North Korea doesn't use the powerful symbolism in the backdrop of the Winter Olympics to paper over the truth about their regime.
He has not ruled out meeting with North Korean officials at the Games. John Mahoney, best known as the down-to-earth, recliner-loving father on Frasier, has died.
You're always whining about wanting to change your hair.
I don't whine. I'm so sick of me hair. Do you think I should get it cut like Princess Di?
Mahoney playing the role of Martin Crane for 11 years on the popular sitcom before battling cancer. John Mahoney was 77 years old. That's a look at your headlines, guys. I'll send it back to you.
He was great.
Yeah, that was a good show.
All right. Thank you, Jillian.
Thanks, Jillian.
All right. The media in panic mode after the stock market's big slide yesterday.
Waves do crash, and that happens from time to time on Wall Street. The White House is finding that out very clearly.
It was the biggest point drop in the history of the stock market.
So how worried should you really be? Our next guest will share what the media is not telling you.
I love that they're laughing about that. Okay. And Pete's having breakfast with friends in Ohio this morning after the president's visit there. Pete?
That's right. We're at Holly's Home Cooking in West Carrollton, Ohio. Come on out if you're here, because yesterday the president was outside of Cincinnati at Schaeffer Corporation talking to employees who received that $1,000 Trump bonus. Turns out they don't think it's breadcrumbs at all. We're going to ask a couple of those employees, as well as other folks. You know, we're talking to the people, not the pundits, as we always do on Fox and Friends. Their specialty is biscuits and gravy, but we got Mickey Mouse pancakes, too. I might be diving into that bacon mouth on the other side of the break. Stick with us on Fox and Friends. We're going to have fun at the diners in a little bit.
How's your blood pressure today? Yesterday, the stock market took a slide, and headlines said the market was crumbling, called the day terrifying, and that the White House is worried. And as usual, mainstream media went wild like this.
The Dow plunged almost 1,200 points, a more than 4.5% fall, to finish below the 25,000 mark, and erasing a lot of our retirement savings.
Waves do crash, and that happens from time to time on Wall Street. The White House is finding that out very clearly this evening.
The president was right all along. We set a new all-time record. Only it was the biggest point drop in the history of the stock market.
It wasn't really a market crash. It was more like a market drunken veering into a ditch, and that ditch was icy and it couldn't get out, and it had to call a tow truck.
Now I remember why I didn't watch that show. How should we all be worried? Here with that is here's what they're not telling you. Is former Wall Street financial analyst and contributor FoxNews.com, Liz Peek. Liz, are you worried?
I'm not particularly worried. Look, almost every year you have a sell-off between 5 and 15% at least once. What we're seeing is a change in the economy. The Fed has backed off after almost a decade of propping up the economy and stocks with very low interest rate, adding trillions to the Fed balance sheet. Now the economy is actually doing it on its own. In fact, we should be celebrating the things that the market is so anxious about. Wages are going up. That was a big issue in the last election, if you remember. Wages are finally going up because the economy is gaining steam. In the first quarter, we may see growth of 4% for the first time in a very long time. Right. So really, all of these trends are extremely positive. Earnings are unbelievable. S&P earnings in the first quarter could be up 20%. So, no, I'm not concerned. I think this sell-off is rattling because you have a whole generation of traders who've never seen this kind of thing before. They've not seen volatility.
But there was no obvious catalyst for what happened yesterday, aside from the fact that they've insinuated, well, you know, there's inflation, so they're going to have to tighten the Fed. Plus, they've got a lot of machines on Wall Street that just make things go like that.
Yeah, I heard overnight that basically it was quant trading, the machine-driven trading was really what drove the market down. It was not fundamentals. If there was a tipping thing, it was probably the jobs report, which was very strong. You saw a little bump up in wages, but I emphasize little, not much more than that. I actually think that Bitcoin may have been an issue because all of a sudden millennials who astonishingly think Bitcoin is much more attractive an investment than stocks or bonds, saw that things can go down. And boy, did it get whacked. So there is some, you know, there's a little nervousness out there, perhaps because of Apple, because of Bitcoin. But I think basically the economic fundamentals are incredibly
Liz, that's
strong.
Wall Street. How does it affect Main Street? How does it affect the people watching?
Well, look, Main Street's going to be pretty happy, right? The worst news for Democrats is that the market and the stock market is really not that important to mainstream America. What is important is rising wages. The tipping in the economy and the news right now that we see is very good for middle America. And I think, frankly, Republicans should be happy we're seeing this now and not 6 months from now.
Okay.
All right,
Thank you,
let's
Les.
peek.
We'll see.
All right.
First, his country made its national anthem gender neutral, and now Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has a new target in his PC crusade.
The love that's going to change the future of mankind. So we'd like you to look
we like to say people kind, not necessarily mankind, because it's more inclusive.
Glad you're up. Hope you're dressed. Now are the headlines. Secretary of Defense James Mattis briefing Congress on the national defense strategy that he's putting forward right now. Now, that last month he revealed he's going to focus on Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea. Lawmakers could also question him about next year's defense budget. And by the way, we're missing $700 million from the Pentagon. And WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange, who looks a lot like that, could leave the Ecuadorian embassy as a free man for the first time in 5 years. That should make Pamela Anderson happy. A British court will decide whether to drop an arrest warrant for violating bail related to crimes in Sweden, which he may not have committed. Assange fears he'll be extradited to the U.S. for questioning if he leaves the embassy. That should be interesting. Steve?
Thank you very much, Brian. President Trump has long stated that he and his family, the target of a politicized Justice Department and FBI. In a recent op-ed on the FoxNews.com site, former Assistant Secretary of State Robert Charles agrees with President Trump. He writes, I have interacted with some of these professionals during the past 2 decades and never perceived them as political. But something overcame them, grabbed them, and turned them into something else during the 2016 election campaign. They devolved into political animals. Former Assistant Secretary of State Robert Charles joins us right now from Washington, D.C. Robert, good morning to you.
Morning.
Who are you talking about?
Well, you know, I want to just talk about this allegation that this is a reckless revelation, this memo. And in fact, it really isn't. There is a public right to know what's happening behind the scenes. It's a very secretive court. And at the end of the day, no sources and methods are given away in this memo. I do think every American should read both the memo and the opposition memo. But, you know, in the grand scheme of things, it's odd to hear opposition to the release of this memo from people like Adam Schiff, because Adam Schiff has spent 9 terms arguing that there should be greater openness at the FISA court. He even wanted outside counsel to be able to present to that court. So I think in the biggest, you know, there's always a weight, there's a moment after which the public right to know outweighs what you call sort of the endemic national security interest, and the national security interest actually tips in favor of the public right to know. And I think that's where we are right now.
Surely. I understand that of the 35,000 FISA warrants that have been requested through the years, how many were denied?
So of the 35,529 warrant requests between 1978 and 2013, only 12 were denied. And that's very peculiar as a starting point, but it's even more peculiar when you think that one of the denials that occurred was in June of 2016. And it was for a surveillance of this individual that was tied to the Trump campaign. Now, you have to understand how the FISA court works. There are 11 judges. Of that group, 4 are Democrats. But oddly, in October of 2016, they reversed themselves and granted this probable cause warrant for surveillance, apparently, of the Trump campaign. How did that happen? It happened because the press has not talked about this. There is a FISA review court, and there are only 3 members of that court. They were all appointed by Bill Clinton. And so one has to surmise that maybe this denial went to them, and individuals, 3 judges who were appointed by the husband of the candidate who provided the opposition research to the probable cause warrant, allowed this surveillance to go forward. And that again, is a very strong reason for the public right to know.
Would it surprise you if they did use that dossier that has been completely unverified as proof that they got to go after Carter Page because they heard George Papadopoulos spout off his mouth when he was liquored up overseas? Would that surprise you?
So, not at all. Indeed, I think they did use it, and that's what the memo suggests. It goes to the heart of what is probable cause before the FISA court. 3 things are required. You have to be targeting a foreign intelligence agent. You have to be looking for either espionage or terrorism, and you have to think that a crime has been committed. Now, I'm not sure I see that in this memo. The memo doesn't suggest any of those things, but let's just imagine, they did all exist. You have a major problem, and that is this, what they call the fruit of the poisonous tree. If a Fourth Amendment violation occurred, and there was literally a constitutional violation by the use of this false information to get the warrant, then the fruit of the tree is all the evidence that comes from that in the future surveillance warrants. And so, really, you've got a major problem. There are exceptions to that rule, but none of them fit here. McCabe has said that without that Steele dossier, they wouldn't have granted the warrant. That's number one. Number 2, the only corroboration was a news story that was actually sourced to Steele. You know, ironically, there is no separate way to get that dossier. That's another exception. And finally, the good faith exception actually doesn't work because they knew that this information had come from a politically financed, Hillary Clinton financed source.
But Robert, ultimately, they said we're going after Carter Page, but really, it was the Trump campaign. It was everybody in their circle. They were using this one guy as the excuse to spy on everybody.
It certainly looks that way, and then you have to ask about these hundreds of unmaskings of Americans. It's very troubling, and it should be to every American.
All right. Robert Charles, former Assistant Secretary of State to Colin Powell, former Bush and Reagan White House staffer. We thank you very much for joining us live.
Thank you.
All right. All right. It is 6:30 here in New York City. Pete Hegseth is having breakfast with friends this morning in Ohio after the president's visit. He's going to be chatting with folks right there as he serves up some coffee. Don't forget, Pete, it's 75 cents a cup. Plus, the video is frightening. A van smashing into a trooper's car on a freeway. Holy cow.
Representative 51 and the other half at number 50.
The new warning from police coming up. But first, happy birthday to singer Rick Astley. He's 52 years old today. Happy birthday, Rick.
Believe it or not, Nancy Pelosi and those in Congress who want to raise your taxes, they want to raise your taxes. They don't want to give the money to the military where we need it. You know, without the military, we might not be here, or we might not be here for long, believe us all. Nancy Pelosi, what she's doing to this country, and she's gone so far left, and Schumer's gone so far left. Oh, I look forward to against them.
President Trump rallying in Ohio yesterday, touting the economy before touring one of the plants, giving out some of those tax cut bonuses.
Well, this morning, Pete Hegseth is live from Holly's Home Cooking in West Carrollton, Ohio. He got a tour of the same plant. Joins us now with the post-game report on POTUS visit to Ohio. Hey, Pete.
That's right. Good morning, guys. Before I talk to a couple of small business owners here in West Carrollton, we did have a chance yesterday to go to Sheffer Corporation, the very corporation the president spoke to. We talked to employees there that received that $1,000 Trump bonus that Nancy Pelosi, as he referenced, calls breadcrumbs. Well, we had a chance to talk to that CEO of Shepherd Corporation. His name is Jeff Norris, a business of about 125 employees. You can tell there's a great rapport between him and his employees. I asked him, what's it like to give a tour to the President of the United States, and what did he say to you, and how much do his policies mean to you? This is what he had to say. Does it surprise you to see the amount of obstruction he faces, just institutional resistance to the policies that seem like common sense to guys on the ground?
Yes, it's very frustrating when you turn on the news and listen to the politicians, and honestly, it's like a bunch of fifth graders. And like I said, if we did that here at our company, we'd be shut down in a heartbeat. He's just a breath of fresh air. He's not connected to anybody, and he's just doing what he thinks is right, and he wants to make it right for the worker, and he wants to make it right for the owners.
So, yeah, that was Jeff Norris. The same message came from employees on the ground as well when we asked them about their bonuses. They're very appreciative of it. So as we're here at Holly's Home Cooking in West Carrollton, which is just down the road from that plant, we wanted to talk to a couple of small business owners as well who support the president and listen to his speech yesterday. Harold and Rick, both in the printing and signage business here. Also, Harold, you're a member of the city council. You've supported the president. You saw his speech yesterday saying that America is open for business. Did it resonate with you?
Oh, absolutely. It was typical Trump. Everything that he says, whether you like the way he says it or not, seems to work out pretty well. And we're a fan.
Now, why is it that Nancy Pelosi and the left is dismissive of $1,000 and calls it breadcrumbs?
I don't know. $1,000 is definitely not crumbs to me. So I can't imagine. She lives in a different universe than the rest of us, I guess.
Yeah, and when the president, the sign hanging behind him in that event was open for business. As a small business owner, do you feel like you have a new era where you're able to operate more freely?
Absolutely. With the reduction in the taxes, in particular, it gives everybody, even the small guys like me and Rick, the opportunity to do things that we probably wouldn't have had otherwise.
Investing in your company.
Investing in the company, right.
Absolutely. Well, Rick, also a Trump supporter who's observed this president. You watched the speech yesterday. What's your biggest takeaway?
I didn't get to watch it. I just got clips.
Sorry, my fault.
That's all right. But so with that being said, I'm just positive about his approach to the tax reductions and the building spirit in America to grow companies and get jobs for Americans. So, but unfortunately, I didn't watch the speech.
But you talked about how his policies are what's most important to you.
Oh, yeah. It's the problem. Everybody's jamming Trump when they should be listening and watching his policies. That's what's going to make America great again.
That's what we heard on the ground at the Shepherd Corporation as well. We're going to talk to one of the employees who was brought up on stage by the president yesterday. Her name is Dina. I can see her right past the camera. We'll be talking to her in the 7 o'clock hour, getting a sense of those $1,000 bonuses and what it's like on the ground in the Trump economy. So back to you guys in New York.
Well, she got the bonus. She can buy breakfast. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pete.
It is 22 minutes now before the top of the hour, and Jillian joins us with some headlines.
That's all right. Good Tuesday morning, guys. Let's get you caught up on your news of the day, starting with this story. Brand new video just released of an out-of-control driver crashing into a state trooper squad car parked on the side of the highway.
Representing 51 and the other half is number 50.
Wow, the minivan smacking right into the cruiser, as you could see, before spinning out into the snow in Minnesota. No one was hurt, but police say this should serve as a reminder for people to move over for emergency vehicles. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau embracing political correctness, setting a young woman straight for using the term mankind.
The love that's going to change the future of mankind. So we'd like you to look
we like to say people kind, not necessarily mankind, because it's more inclusive.
There we go, exactly.
Well, the woman was asking Trudeau to make it easier for religious charitable organizations to provide help for those in need. A Girl Scout could be in trouble for selling cookies outside of a pot shop. The San Diego Girl Scout Council now looking into whether a 9-year-old girl broke any rules when she and her father sold more than 300 boxes outside of a marijuana dispensary. Word got out after the pot shop posted this picture online. The organization saying while the dispensary is not an approved site for sales, the girl didn't technically break any rules since she sold them on the sidewalk. And happy birthday to former President Ronald Reagan, the 40th Commander-in-Chief, born on this day 107 years ago.
Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday, Mr. President.
Reagan, seen here celebrating his 72nd birthday with wife Nancy in 1983. He died of Alzheimer's disease in 2004. Guys.
There you go. All right. Thank you very much.
And
All right.
aren't we glad he was born? He's a great American.
There you go.
All right. Thank you, Jillian. The Democrats' rebuttal to that FISA abuse memo heads to the president's desk. So what happens now? Will he release it? Judge Napolitano, he's on the case. He's coming in to tell us.
Yeah, we usually put him on the stairs. I wonder what happened to this decision. And Ohio Congressman Jim Jordan and Brad Wenstrup will be here, and Stuart Varney. And play this game at home. Which one, Stuart?
Get ready.
Another declassified document set to shake up Congress, and this time it's the Democrats' turn.
This will help inform the public of the many distortions and inaccuracies in the majority memo. We're going to insist that the Department of Justice and the FBI report to us on what redactions they think are necessary so that we can segregate any political interference from the White House.
Well, the Democrats' rebuttal memo now heading to the president's desk as the House Intel Committee voted yesterday unanimously to make it public. So what happens next?
Judge Napolitano's here. Judge, what happens next?
Well, it's up to the president now. Presumably, according to Congressman Schiff, the FBI and the DOJ have already reviewed it or are in the process of reviewing it. But if the president does nothing, it comes out on Saturday. The president can redact, or the president can prevent it from coming out. It's entirely in his hands. He has both a legal, national security, and political judgments to make as to whether he wants this to come out.
What do you hope he does?
I hope he releases it because it will show who's spinning, who's exaggerating. But it's also going to show this, Ainsley. Raw intelligence. There's everything in there. If you like Donald Trump, you're going to find some stuff in there. If you don't like Donald Trump, you're going to find some stuff in there. So the pressure, once this Democratic memo comes out, the pressure will build for the raw intelligence on which the Republican memo is based and on which the Democratic memo is based to come out. That will send the intelligence community through the roof because this stuff is never, ever made public.
What is the FBI's going to get a look at it before it comes out, according to Schiff.
Yes. What does raw intelligence consist of? Digital recordings of telephone conversations, copies of text messages, copies of emails, any kind of fiber optic information that was transmitted that was captured by the intelligence communities. The intelligence community, which exists to preserve national security, doesn't want the public or the bad guys to know the nature and extent of what they capture and download. If these raw materials come out, we will know that.
So a week ago, the Democrats didn't want the Republican memo to come out. It came out on Friday. They were steamed that when there was a vote, can we release both of these simultaneously? And the Republicans said no, and it was a party line deal. Ultimately, we understand now it was political from the Democrats, but what about the FBI and the Department of Justice? Why were they so squarely against the release last week?
3 words in the Republican memo. The FBI and the DOJ begged Congressman Nunes to remove, and he and the Republican majority chose not to. The references to Chris Steele, the author of the infamous dossier, referred to in the Republican memo as longtime FBI asset. Well, what is wrong with that? Okay, so we have an agreement with Great Britain, with Canada, with Australia, with New Zealand. We're the 5th, called the 5 Eyes, EYES. We freely exchange information, intelligence information. In return for that exchange, we agree not to recruit someone from one of the other countries. The FBI recruited Chris Steele, contrary to that agreement. If they recruited him at the same time he was still an MI6 agent, that means he was spying for Great Britain and spying for the United States, which would violate British law. He could be subject to prosecution.
Wow.
The FBI did not want that known, and Congressman Nunes decided to.
Well, now they know.
Yes.
Okay, so now let's move on to the other story. Front page of the New York Times today. It says that there's a division among the legal team of President Trump. Ty Cobb says talk to Robert Mueller. Jay Sekulow and John Dowd say do not talk to him. Governor Christie weighs in, says he should not talk to him.
Let me tell you how it will work. The request to talk to him is a request. So if he talks to Mueller, it'll be a massive interview. It won't just be Mueller. It'll be prosecutors and FBI agents. It won't be under oath. It won't be public. It'll be a Q&A. President can answer however long he wants to. We all know what he's like. He doesn't always use an economy of words. Sometimes it's informational. Mueller wants to know what he's thinking. Sometimes it's deadly. They may want to trap him. If he doesn't do that, they can have the grand jury subpoena him. Mueller has 2 grand juries, one downtown Washington, D.C., one in Alexandria,
The president's
Virginia.
attorneys don't think that'll happen. Do you think it will?
I do.
You do?
And my advice to the president, which is pretty much standard advice, there's never, ever, ever talk to a guy that owns a grand jury. He is not your friend.
But he's going to they're going to go fight the subpoena, and it's going to go up to the Supreme Court. Now, how will they rule?
I doubt that it would go to the Supreme Court because it is so procedural and so basic that if somebody is served with a subpoena, they could subpoena you or me and drag us down there and say, what do you know about Trump and the Russians? Answer nothing. But we'd have to go and we'd have to answer. The standard rule is you're subpoenaed, you have to go. The president would have to go. He doesn't have to answer, but he has to show up.
Right.
All right.
Thank you for showing up.
Anytime, guys.
All right, Judge.
All right, former Duck Dynasty Sadie Robertson spent some time in one of the world's most dangerous countries. She left just 1 hour before a massive bombing killed hundreds of people. She's here to tell how her faith helped her fight that fear and tell us about her new book. That's next. Another declassified document set to shake up Congress, and this time it's the Democrats' turn.
This will help inform the public of the many distortions and inaccuracies in the majority memo. We're going to insist that the Department of Justice and the FBI report to us on what redactions they think are necessary so that we can segregate any political interference from the White House.
Well, the Democrats' rebuttal memo now heading to the president's desk as the House Intel Committee voted yesterday unanimously to make it public. So what happens next?
Judge Napolitano's here. Judge, what happens next?
Well, it's up to the president now. Presumably, according to Congressman Schiff, the FBI and the DOJ have already reviewed it or are in the process of reviewing it. But if the president does nothing, it comes out on Saturday. The president can redact or the president can prevent it from coming out. It's entirely in his hands. He has both a legal, national security, and political judgments to make as to whether he wants this to come out.
What do you hope he does?
I hope he releases it because
Why?
it will show who's spinning, who's exaggerating. But it's also going to show this, Ainsley. Raw intelligence. There's everything in there. If you like Donald Trump, you're going to find some stuff in there. If you don't like Donald Trump, you're going to find some stuff in there. So the pressure, once this Democratic memo comes out, the pressure will build for the raw intelligence on which the Republican memo is based and on which the Democratic memo is based to come out. That will send the intelligence community through the roof because this stuff is never, ever made public.
The FBI is going to get a look at it before it comes out, according to Schiff.
Yes. What does raw intelligence consist of? Digital recordings of telephone conversations, copies of text messages, copies of emails, any kind of fiber optic information that was transmitted that was captured by the intelligence communities. The intelligence community, which exists to preserve national security, doesn't want the public or the bad guys to know the nature and extent of what they capture and download. If these raw materials come out, we will know that.
So a week ago, the Democrats didn't want the Republican memo to come out. It came out on Friday. They were steamed that when there was a vote, can we release both of these simultaneously? And the Republicans said no, and it was a party line deal. Ultimately, we understand now it was political from the Democrats, but what about the FBI and the Department of Justice? Why were they so squarely against the release last week?
3 words in the Republican memo. The FBI and the DOJ begged Congressman Nunes to remove, and he and the Republican majority chose not to. The reference is to Chris Steele, the author of the infamous dossier, referred to in the Republican memo as longtime FBI asset. Well, what is wrong with that? Okay, so we have an agreement with Great Britain, with Canada, with Australia, with New Zealand. We're the 5th, called the 5 Eyes, EYES. We freely exchange information, intelligence information. In return for that exchange, we agree not to recruit someone from one of the other countries. The FBI recruited Chris Steele, contrary to that agreement. If they recruited him at the same time he was still an MI6 agent, that means he was spying for Great Britain and spying for the United States, which would violate British law. He could be subject to prosecution.
Wow.
The FBI did not want that known, and Congressman Nunes decided to.
Well, now they know.
Yes.
Okay, so now let's move on to the other story. Front page of the New York Times today. It says that there's a division among the legal team of President Trump. Ty Cobb says talk to Robert Mueller. Jay Sekulow and John Dowd say do not talk to him. Governor Christie weighs in, says he should not talk to him.
Let me tell you how it will work. The request to talk to him is a request. So if he talks to Mueller, it'll be a massive interview. It won't just be Mueller. It'll be prosecutors and FBI agents. It won't be under oath. It won't be public. It'll be a Q&A. Mm-hmm. President can answer however long he wants to. We all know what he's like. He doesn't always use an economy of words. Sometimes it's informational. Mueller wants to know what he's thinking. Sometimes it's deadly. They may want to trap him. If he doesn't do that, they can have the grand jury subpoena him. Mueller has 2 grand juries, one downtown Washington, D.C., one in Alexandria,
The president's
Virginia.
attorneys don't think that'll happen. Do you think it will?
I do.
You do?
And my advice to the president, which is pretty much standard advice, is never, ever, ever talk to a guy that owns a grand jury. He is not your friend.
But he's going to. They're going to go fight the subpoena, and it's going to go up to the Supreme Court. Now, how will they rule?
I doubt that it would go to the Supreme Court because it is so procedural and so basic that if somebody is served with a subpoena, they could subpoena you or me and drag us down there and say, "What do you know about Trump and the Russians?" Answer nothing. But we'd have to go and we'd have to answer. The standard rule is you're subpoenaed, you have to go. The president would have to go. He doesn't have to answer, but he has to show up.
Right.
All right.
Thank you for showing up.
Anytime, guys.
All right, Judge.
All right, former Duck Dynasty Sadie Robertson spent some time in one of the world's most dangerous countries. She left just 1 hour before a massive bombing killed hundreds of people. She's here to tell how her faith helped her fight that fear and tell us about her new book. That's next.